Wyatt playing Esper Control. So I imagine we're in a bit of a long, drawn-out affair here. But Adrian did seem to maybe win game one relatively quickly, as it looks like he's resolving a Sphinx's Revelation.
So I talked to Adrian yesterday, and the only advice I gave him on this deck was if he had flex slots in his list, probably err towards adding Last Breath into your main deck with those flex slots, because there's going to be a lot of Rebel Red in this metagame, a lot of beatdown decks in general. He's playing 2 copies in his main deck this weekend. A lot of the weirdo stuff that you expected of Adrian's blue-white list, if you've been following him, things like 1 copy of Darksteel Ingot, 1 copy of Render Silent, 1 copy of Essence Scatter. These are things that, you know, they're one-ofs, but they supplement cards that are already 3 or 4-ofs in the deck.
Yeah, you do see the Ingot's actually in play right now. However, Wyatt is the one who looks to have the better board. He's got himself an Elspeth on 6, some Soldier tokens in play. He's also got a Jace Memory Adept that's on 5, and an Elixir of Immortality. So it looks like he's going to mill Sullivan for 10 cards here. And Adrian's got to try to beat these Planeswalkers, which means he needs to try to find a card like Planner Cleansing, a card I'm not even sure is in his list.
I believe he has 2 copies.
Okay.
So he's playing a Planar Cleansing list, but is not even playing that many Planar Cleansings. His deck has a lot more 1-for-1 reaction to it. You know, there's more counter spells in here than you're going to see in the average blue-white control list.
Elspeth is going to take on up to 7, and Wyatt will happily pass the turn back. Sullivan is going to cycle a copy of Azorius Charm on the end step. We'll draw a mystery card, then untap all those lands, but he is certainly behind on the board right now, sitting at 19 life, but he's got to try to beat these Planeswalkers here.
Something that's very, noticeable about this matchup, and again, if you've seen Adrian play, this should come as no surprise. You are seeing that we're in the middle of game 2. This has gone on for a very long time by the looks of things, and there's still 35 minutes left on the clock. Adrian's very quick at playing in the mirror matches, even willing to give up some, accuracy in his plays. He's willing to concede a little bit that he's not going to always be making the 100% ideal play to make the play that's close enough and allow him to finish the match in time.
One card it looks like Adrian actually has in his hand is a copy of Trading Post.
There is, going to the sideboard, there is a copy.
Okay. And what makes that interesting is because he's been milled quite a few times. It looks like he does not have very many cards in his library. Now, Trading Post has the ability to get back an Elixir of Immortality. And if you follow Adrian at all, you know that Adrian is a huge proponent of Elixir of Immortality. And that'll actually get him out of trouble in this situation, assuming the Elixir has been milled at this point. So Adrian's going to lead off with the Trading Post to get the action started.
The action? The laction.
Yeah.
The lack of action.
Fair enough. No argument here.
So Adrian is a big Elixir proponent. A lot of the matchups he plays is trying to establish some sort of Elixir loop where he can just rev a bunch and win the game that way. And this is definitely a matchup where this line of play is common.
So the Trading Post is going to get back the Elixir. The Elixir is going to come into play, which means that Adrian cannot get milled out at this point from that Jace. And now he's just going to pass the turn back. And it also looks like he might be facing close. Actually, because the Elixir gains 5 life, he's actually not going to be facing lethal damage from this Elspeth Ultimate. So he's getting a little frisky.
Adrian is a big fan of trying to play the game into this sort of spot. I mean, I'm sure that he would like to be the one with, Planeswalkers and, winning the game on that front. But when he's on the back foot, he's totally happy to go to this backup plan, which is try to deck out or at least establish a looping Revelation and overpower the game from there. His hand's gonna be forced. I mean, he's gonna have to use this Elixir now.
Jace is gonna tick up. We'll mill Adrian a card. Plains goes to the bin. Card goes to Wyatt's hand. Looks like Adrian may have only 3 cards left, and he actually is down to 2 cards, we've been told, in his library. So Adrian's sitting here somewhat confidently, or at least trying to show some confidence. Elspeth will be cashed in for an emblem. So all Wyatt's creatures moving forward will have +2/+2 and flying. So all those soldier tokens are going to turn sideways. And I believe there are 9 of them out there, and Adrian is going to concede the game. So Derek Wyatt will win game number 2 against Adrian Sullivan. Esper Control ties things up against Blue-White Control. And that means we're going to move to the sideboards here, and you have the pleasure of analyzing Adrian's crazy one-of board.
Yep, a Last Breath, a Blind Obedience, a Ratchet Bomb, a Domestication, a Celestial Flare, 2 copies of Negate, a Jace's Ingenuity, a Trading Post, a Gainsay, a Deicide, a Debtor's Pulpit, a Jace Memory Adept, a Glare of Heresy, and a Dispel. I think the additional counter spells, Jace Memory Adept, the Jace's Ingenuity, these are all reasonable cards to bring in. You saw the trading post there as well.
Looking at Wyatt's board, again, normally when you see Esper, that means there's going to be some Thought Seizes looming here. He's got 2 copies of Jace Memory Adept. We, of course, saw one of those in play. 2 copies of DSI, 3 Archangel of Thune, 3 Nyx Fleece Ran to make himself better against the Rabble Red decks, which look to be popular this afternoon. An Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, a Blind Obedience, an Ultimate Price, an Elixir of Immortality, and a Prognostic Sphinx. Oddly enough, he doesn't have a ton of cards that seem great in the mirror. Of course, we love Jace, and we saw it had an impact on that game. Ashiok's pretty good as well. We've seen Gerard Fabiano play that card a lot. And then the Elixir seems all right as well, but you don't see cards like Negate or other counter spells in the sideboard here. You oftentimes see a card like Dispel as well. That's not hiding out here for Wyatt on the board.
No, I think Prognostic Sphinx has the potential to do something big in the matchup here. Very good at taxing Planeswalkers, and if Adrian has shaved out his sweepers, he might not have a lot of answers for that card in his list.
Well, game number 3 will be underway here shortly. You see there's plenty of time on the clock, and while these players do shuffle up and get ready for what will probably be a pretty lengthy affair, we will actually talk about the brand new states and regionals program that we do have coming. Now, of course, we had states, this year, spring states. We've already talked about autumn states, but we're bringing it back, as you mentioned.
Yeah, there's going to be regionals, the weekends of Pro Tours in the winter and the summer of 2015. We're going to have more deals on this, more information on this program coming to you at Grand Prix Orlando in the beginning of October. For the time being, this is going to be another, states level program, though there will be fewer of them. They're going to be, as the name implies, more regional based than state based. And again, these are going to be Pro Tour weekends in the summer and winter of 2015.
So it should be fun in the spring, April 11th through the 12th, autumn, October 17th and the 18th, for regionals where you can plant your flag winter, February 7th and the 8th, and then the summer, the August 1st and the 2nd. So looking forward to these for sure.
All of these are Pro Tour weekends.
Yep.
So if you're not qualified for the Pro Tour, there's a lot of events for you to play in through Star City Games organized play.
Game number 3 here between Sullivan and Wyatt. You mentioned they want to, stay out of draw territory, and with 26 minutes before game 3, we should be good to go. And as you mentioned, Adrian plays at a pretty quick pace here.
It's the one skill I think that Adrian has that separates him from a lot of the control players we have on camera is the speed with which he plays the deck.
Adrian starts off with a Hollow Fountain into a Mutavault before passing the turn back. Wyatt with an Island. He'll kick it back. Sullivan will cast a Divination. We'll see if this does resolve. And it will. So 2 cards coming for Sullivan. Again, if you do follow Adrian, he's been playing Blue-White Control for a while. Actually qualified for the Pro Tour that's taking place in Honolulu later this year. Playing Blue-White Control, making top 4 to Grand Prix.
Yeah, Grand Prix Chicago a little while ago. Also, I believe was the runner-up at the SCG in Milwaukee a few months ago as well.
Correct.
He's had quite a bit of success with this deck.
A Hollow Fountain's going to come to play on tap there for Sullivan, and we'll see if he wants to deploy a spell this turn, something like a Jace, but he will just kick the turn back, able to represent a card like Dissolve at this point. This may be a Thoughtseize, and it is, but a Render Silent will stop that and everything else this turn. So a Temple of Silence here for Wyatt.
Oh, Adrian, don't ever change.
Absolutely not.
Hoping Derek would use that Thoughtseize maybe to follow up with something that turn.
Here's a Jace. This is going to take down. You see an Island, a Quicken, and a Temple of Deceit are the cards that Wyatt will have to split up. Oh, those fun ofs from Sullivan. Quicken's on its own. Unsurprisingly, Adrian's going to take those lands. See if he wants to play the Scry land here. He's just going to go with an Island and take maybe the opportunity to deploy something, but it looks like he's just going to kick the turn back. You see, he is moving at a very rapid pace.
And I wonder if Adrian was thinking about casting something and then decided against it, because that would have been not a bad spot to stick a Temple.
This is a Jace for Wyatt. Jace Memory Adept. We saw it in the last game. It's here for this one as well. 2 of those in his sideboard. And he will mill Sullivan a card. There goes the Divination, and a Swamp is added to Wyatt's hand. So up to 5 goes that Jace. Sullivan will draw a card. Picks up a copy of Cyclonic Rift. Another one of those beautiful fun ofs. Going to cash in his Jace, an Azorius Charm, a Sphinx's Revelation, and a Temple of Enlightenment. And Wyatt says Sphinx's Revelation will go on its own. Adrian will quickly gobble that up, so those 2 cards will go to the bottom. And Sullivan has not played a land yet this turn. Here's 2 mana. That's a copy of Cyclonic Rift. That's going to get that thing off the table. There's a Mutavault. This is an Elixir. And Sullivan will pass the turn back. You have to imagine he has counter magic for Jace on the way back down.
And it's really tough on Derek now, because I think he was hoping to lean on that Jace. And now with the way that Adrian has sequenced everything, you have to imagine that tapping out on your own turn is an enormous cost.
Yes. Also, there are 2 Mutavaults out there to kind of check the Jace.
Another factor as well.
Well, here's Jace again. Adrian, gonna take a look at his hand. There's no counterspell there. So, mill Sphinx's Revelation. Wyatt will get a card, but again, those two mutables out there can really keep that thing in check, and Wyatt is tapped out on resources. He will play a Temple, leave that card on top very quickly, and he will kick the turn back over to Sullivan, who will untap and draw. Adrian draws a copy of Deicide for the turn. And again, he doesn't have to be, I think, overly concerned with his Jace at this point. He does have an Elixir in play if Wyatt tries to take the mill route. And of course, again, with two Mutavaults in play, he can really pressure that thing to make sure it doesn't have a huge impact on the game. He's going to tap a bunch of mana right now, maybe. The answer is yes, and now there's an Aetherling.
Oh, wow.
There's a tapped land and Temple of Deceit, and pass the turn back.
Taking a risk here.
It puts Wyatt to the test. However, you have to imagine, okay, the Supreme Verdicts are likely out of his deck.
Yep.
You can't imagine any spot removals in the deck. So what's the card that's likely to take care of that? Detention Sphere.
And you have a Deicide at the ready.
Correct. So it is a bit of a risk, but at the same time, things will probably break Adrian's weight here, given that he has a Deicide. There is the Sphere. And he's going to go actually after the Elixir. But again, Deicide will take care of that as well. Now there's a Hero's Downfall.
Now that's a bit of a tragedy for Adrian. I mean, that there was a spot removal spell at the ready to take care of Aetherling that wasn't a Detention Sphere. I think Adrian was really hoping to avoid that.
So it's a bit of a mill action. Planar cleansing among the cards that have been turned over there for Sullivan.
Derek taking a very aggressive line of play here, trying to end this one quickly. But we know that Adrian can Deicide this Detention Sphere away.
And on his upkeep, he's actually going to cast Fated Retribution. Now, when you do cast this on your own turn, you get the Scry. So the reason that Adrian is casting it on his upkeep is because he'd like to make sure he knows what he's drawing for the turn.
And Fated Retribution, just another fun of that's kind of a redundant card in the deck. It's supplementing the other sweepers, but
I do wonder after rotation how much play this card's going to see. It's very, very powerful. And a format with Elspeth and what looks to be a lot of good Planeswalkers?
I believe it will see less play than it does now.
Okay.
I think it's hard to get to the stage to play cards like this without something like Sphinx's Revelation in your deck.
It's a Jace. This is Baby Jace. Architect of Thought's going to turn over a couple of cards. A Detention Sphere, an Island, and a copy of Doomblade. So more removal in Wyatt's deck than I think maybe Sullivan anticipated.
Well, a lot of blue-white control decks do get more creature-oriented post-board. Derek seems conscious of this. He has a lot of spot removal in his deck.
We have seen players like Joe Lissette bring an Archangel of Thune in the mirror a lot.
Yeah.
Of course, being able to take care of those Mutavaults is pretty important as well. Those things are a real headache against Planeswalkers.
Sometimes you see things like Soldier of the Pantheon. I mean, you can see all sorts of conversion plans out of blue-white decks.
It's a planar cleansing. Now that's going to take care of the Jace and the Detention Sphere, which means that Adrian will get his Elixir back, and he does have 2 mana available. So we'll see what Wyatt can put together this turn as these players continue on with their speed magic.
Yeah, both players, Adrian and Derek, have played at a very crisp pace thus far.
Hallowed Fountain's going to come play untapped. Wyatt's going to go down to 16. And he'll just pass the turn back. Sullivan will draw. Wyatt in his hand does have not 1 but 2 copies of Sphinx's Revelation.
It's going to be really hard for Adrian to stop both of these copies. He's shown over the last few turns that there have been not a lot of counter spells in his hand. No reason to believe that's changed very much.
This is a Rev from Derek Wyatt with 2 mana available. Adrian going to give this a long thought, and it looks like this is going to resolve.
Derek is bringing a pretty solid build to the table for control mirror matches. Having access to an Elixir plus all of his Thoughtseizes, definitely prepared to play against a deck like blue-white.
Also has a Liliana Vest in his main deck as well. That card can play a huge role. Here's a Temple of Enlightenment.
Derek's mana is really strained. The Liliana you just alluded to alongside Hero's Downfall, alongside counter spells and sweepers and so forth, but in a matchup like blue-white, they're not really going to punish you for stumbling a little bit with your mana early on. And the additional power and flexibility that Derek gets is definitely worth it.
It's a Jace. And Sullivan says, I'd like to resolve a Revelation. And so that is going to happen. It will only be for 3. It's a bit of a small one. Adrian will draw. There's a Jace of his own. So he's had a little bit of difficulty finding lands for the past couple of turns. And of course, we know how important the land advantage is in the control mirror. So he's going to tick down this Jace, and he's going to find a couple lands and the mighty Debtor's Pulpit.
Debtor's Pulpit in the sideboard and answer to Aetherling or any other random threat that Derek may have sided in.
Yeah, get that Mutavault out of here, too. It can take care of basically anything.
With a low cost of 5 mana plus your land.
Hey.
But we've seen Adrian do a lot of work with Debtor's Pulpit.
Whatever it takes, right? Wyatt will untap and draw a card here. He will tick down, actually tick up his Jace. So that means maybe he's playing for the ultimate. He'll play a Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top cards, the Temple of Silence, which means that's going to go on the bottom. And he'll pass the turn back over to Sullivan. Sullivan will draw another copy of Sphinx's Revelation. Looks like Derek Wyatt might be working his way towards a Jace ultimate here. Not sure the strength of his hand, though.
Adrian has not shown a lot of ability to remove planeswalkers from the table thus far. In the game 2 that we came in at the end of, Elspeth and Jace looked like they had been unchecked for several turns. Adrian has a Detention Sphere planeswalker in the previous game or this game, and Derek might assume that Adrian just can't really touch them once they resolve.
Trading Post will be countered via Dissolve. Didn't think I would ever say that.
Trading Post is pretty good against decks that tend to play cards like Dissolve.
I agree.
So
I didn't expect to really be saying a lot about Trading Post, period, especially this early in the morning.
Out of a blue-white control player.
Yeah. Taking up Jace once again, will Wyatt. Wyatt with a lot of cards in his hand, staring at 7 of them. Doesn't have to discard at this point. So Sullivan is going to shuffle up with the Elixir and rebuild his deck.
Keep in mind, we know that Derek has that copy of Doomblade from a Jace activation several turns ago. So it's a pretty big cost for Adrian to go after this Jace with his 2 Mutavaults because he has to spend a lot of mana, and he knows that one of the Mutavaults is going to trade with an otherwise dead Doomblade.
Sullivan going to cash in his Jace here. So there's a Mutavault, there's Divination. That's a copy of Dispel. Dispel's going to go on its own. Adrian's going to gobble that up very, very quickly. So Divination and the Mutavault will go to the bottom. Let's see what else Adrian can put together this turn, because that Jace is starting to be a little bit threatening now. Especially when he did shuffle in the Aetherling. Now, of course, Aetherling, when Wyatt controls it, he can't blink it out or anything like that because then it'll go back to Adrian. But,
yeah,
again, it is a little bit scary to have that in your deck for Wyatt to take. Here's a large Sphinx's Revelation from Derek on Adrian's end step. Looks like 4 mana is going to be left over.
And oddly enough, not a lot of it blue.
That's a touch strange.
Derek has left up just a Hallowed Fountain, so the only counterspell that Adrian really has to play around here if he chose to would be Syncopate or something narrow like Gainsay,
Negate, something like
Dispel,
that. Yep.
cards like that.
Doesn't have to worry about Dissolve, but the ref is going to resolve. So Wyatt will draw a handful of cards, +1 for his draw step, taking up the Jace yet again, up to 8, threatening an ultimate. There's a Water Grave that'll come into play tapped. Derek will have to discard as we are underneath 7 minutes now. Here's a rev from Sullivan with 3 mana left over.
And Adrian in that spot, choosing not to fight over Derek's Revelation the following turn, knowing that Derek was most likely going to just untap, play a land, and discard to hand size.
Quite interesting as these players try to pick their spots for how they want to use their limited counter magic. Looks like Sullivan picked up a copy of Negate. We already know he has a Dispel. May have to do some amount of discarding here. But this is going to be 4, 5, 6, cleansing. This is probably where the fight will begin. Yep. It is about that time. That looks like it's going to be a Dimir Charm, by the way.
Okay.
Don't see that one very often. So now it's time for a Dispel on the Dimir Charm. Dimir Charm, of course, can't counter a sorcery. So it's going to attempt to counter the Planar Cleansing. The cleansing will resolve, so Jace's ultimate is no longer something that is threatening.
And Adrian's way out in front of resources now at this point.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like, you know, getting that Jace off the table, that was the fight that Adrian had to win. Now he has done that. He has additional copies of Mutavault to work with. If he wants to start pressuring Derek's life total, he probably has much more power in his hand at this point. And if he can find that Aetherling, he may be able to close out this game very quickly.
Here's a backup Jace from Wyatt. See if this one resolves. It will, and it ticks up to 5. So Sullivan's going to quickly untap, and again, You see both players been playing at a very rapid pace because now we're about to be underneath 5 minutes, but you mentioned Aetherling, and now here that is.
And this is not a tapped-out Aetherling like we saw last time. This is an Aetherling with plenty of protection.
The Mighty Darksteel Ingot's going to come into play for Sullivan.
Boom.
And he'll just pass the turn back, so it's combo Planar Cleansing.
Right, because he had to cut the Azorius Key Rune that was in his Milwaukee list because he moved to Planar Cleansing, so now he has an Ingot.
You know what that is?
That's how you build a deck.
That's good deck building.
That is good deck building.
And Elixir there from Wyatt after taking up the Jace. Sullivan's going to get to work with this Aetherling now. We'll see where it's going to go and how much it's going to be for.
I think the first order of business is probably getting this Jace off the table because the Jace can plus to shrink the Aetherling size. Also, at some point, Adrian has to kill it anyway.
Yep. So that Jace goes away. A Jace comes into play for Sullivan. He will take it down. Lands will go to the grip. One will go to the bottom. And it looks like Adrian's happy to just pass the turn back over to Wyatt, who will untap and draw a card. Again, he's sitting at 27 while Sullivan's sitting at 29. Both players with a ton of lands in play for Wyatt. The only permanent, however, is just an Elixir of Immortality. Sullivan is doing better on the board and potentially in hand, even though we don't know the texture of both players' hands at this point.
And Adrian playing with a lot of speed, as you can see.
There's some real urgency here. Again, getting a draw in round one is a horrible spot to be in. He'll take the 2 cards, among them a Debtor's Pulpit. One, of course, will go to the bottom. He'll play a copy of Elspeth's Sun's Champion. Maybe we'll have a fight over this. Maybe we won't. We will see in just a moment. Looks to be a Dissipate. Haven't seen this one in a while. I remember this one during Innistrad block.
Yeah, well, there was so much graveyard matter stuff going on in Innistrad that it was all over the place. Here, in this standard format, much less so. I guess it comes up a bit in these Elixir mirror matches that, exiling can be significant against these souls if they ever turn up in constructed level play.
I think they will.
I think so too.
A Syncopate for a large amount. But Adrian has a gainsay.
Standard open players, that is time in round
So Sullivan is going to win the counter war. Elspeth will make soldiers.
Otherwise, active player
A Temple of Enlightenment will come into play tapped.
additional turns. Once again, standard open players, that is time in round one.
Elspeth. Adrian just throwing a guy on there, saying, all right, how much can I get in for? Yep. There's some amount of damage. Again, you have to imagine Adrian's feeling, Wyatt doesn't really have a lot in this situation.
And the battle's going to be over time. It's going to be very hard for Derek to win the game from this juncture. May actually be impossible. But Derek may be able to defend himself long enough to get a draw, and that's what Adrian's got to be worried about.
A Banishing Light's going to come in. It's going to take care of Elspeth. That's gone. So Adrian very quickly saying, that's fine, that's fine. Let me untap, let me untap. Let me give the beatdowns. See what else Wyatt has to do on this turn as we are only 2 minutes in this match. It's a copy of Hero's Downfall. So the Aetherling is going to bite the dust. However, Adrian with a Deicide on the Elspeth, on the Banish Light to unleashes Elspeth.
Yeah, losing the Aetherling there is a bit of a loss for Adrian, but now he's gotten the Hero's Downfall out of the hand and the Doomblade, and he can be pretty confident that now the Mutavaults are freed up.
He's going to cast a Revelation here for some large number.
Basically a new hand. I don't think he wants to use all of his mana necessarily into this Revelation because he's going to discard anyway, and he wants to have his mana free to counter stuff on of Derek's or potentially activate Mutavaults.
You see he's going to activate his Elspeth. He's also going to attack with the 2 Mutavaults and the tokens. Elspeth is up to 5, so 3 more soldiers are coming. Of course, it was hit by a Banishing Light last turn, so again, from 4 to 5 yet again. He's trying to work his way towards that ultimate to maybe try to close this game out, though Wyatt is going to go up a little bit higher to 20 as he does activate the Elixir. Adrian just hoping that he can deal the last points of damage to get the job done.
Well, it looks like Adrian will be able to generate lethal in roughly 3 turns. So even if time expires on Derek's turn, Adrian will get that opportunity.
Not a great idea of what Adrian actually drew from the revelation. I think what he's just looking for is just counter magic. Just some sort of permission. Sullivan's going to quickly untap. He'll activate the Mutavaults, get in the red zone here for 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points of damage. Elspeth's going to go up to 6. There's an island. Looks like he may have a spell to cast. It's a Jace. That one's going to tick up. If it resolves, here's a dissolve. That bites the dust very quickly.
Yeah, and Adrian's not going to fight that fight. Doesn't even matter.
Doesn't need that card to win.
Yeah.
See why it's a 10 now. There are 3 more soldier tokens. Adrian was turn number 0, so Derek Wyatt will be turn number 1. So Derek Wyatt is turn number 1. He'll attempt to cast a revelation here on Adrian's end step. Adrian says, absolutely not. Negate that. Because you gaining life is way too important. Adrian actually pauses Derek and he says, I actually have a revelation I may want to cast. But he says, okay, go ahead. He can slow down a little bit now that we're in turns.
Yeah. Though, a lot of credit goes to Adrian for getting the game to this spot because a slower player, this would have been an easy draw.
Absolutely. There's a rev. Adrian gonna see how much mana do you have left over. This is why he's trying to play around Syncopate at this point. This looks to be a rev in response from Sullivan, so this will be for 4.
So this is a tap out rev for Adrian, which means Derek's is going to get a resolve as well.
But a dissolve is actually going to counter that. Okay, so this is going to happen. 1, 2, 3, and 4 cards there for Wyatt. He's up to 14. See if he can find a card like an Attention Sphere. He does. That's very big here for Derek. 3 mana. Sphere. Going to take care of the soldier tokens. Big draw there for Derek. Just trying to stay alive.
It still seems like Adrian should be fine, assuming that Derek's hand isn't terribly loaded. He gets to plus the Elspeth this turn, make an emblem next turn.
The draw for the turn was a copy of Dissolve. That's pretty big for Adrian. Again, a situation here where Derek is playing for the draw, Adrian trying to play for the win. We'll see if Sullivan can get the job done as he crashes in with 2 Mutavaults. Wyatt's going to go down to 10.
I don't know if there's anything that Adrian can really appreciably add to his board at this point. He may just be plussing and sending the turn back, which looks like what's happening here.
How dare you talk about trading posts like that? How dare you? Apologize.
I do not feel like this
Apologize.
I am sorry.
Thank you.
I am sorry, Adrian and Trading Post fans.
Thank you. Brad is probably watching. You know how Brad feels about Trading Post?
Big fan.
Yeah. It always has an impact. It's got 4 lines of text. He's going to activate it right now. There goes the ingot. Ever heard of it? Okay. Oh, how wrong you were.
Adrian just using every part of the buffalo there.
Wyatt
Plays the ingot, taps it for mana a couple times, has it left over after planar cleansing at some point, cashes it in for a new card.
Here's 3 mana. There's the Attention Sphere again. I think Adrian's going to have to counter this one.
Yeah, I think he does, because otherwise he's not going to be able to get the kill next turn.
There's Resolve. See if it does resolve. It does. Derek kind of shrugged his shoulders here. Let's see what this is going to be. Bunch of mana. Another rev. It's not that big of one, though.
But it may be enough to keep him out of lethal range.
Here's a Quicken. Adrian will draw. It's a copy of Planar Cleansing. No, don't need that right now.
Well, the Elspeth emblem is worth 10 points next turn on board. Plus 7 power, so 17. So Derek still needs help from this spot. And this is just to get the draw.
Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the other card he has in his hand is actually a copy of Elixir of Immortality.
And I think Elixir is enough for him to survive at this stage.
Doing a little bit of math here.
Because the emblem next turn pushes Adrian to 17 points of damage in play.
Yep. There's an Elixir. See, Derek is trying to hang on. It's in. Adrian's turn number 4. Adrian will draw a card. It's a copy of, looks like, Jace's Ingenuity. He doesn't need more card drawing. What he needs is ways to deal more damage. And one thing we know about blue-white, no hasty threats here.
Derek has done a pretty impressive job, you know, getting help here on back-to-back turns. I mean, he's been on the ropes, and I think he's found maybe just enough defense to be able to scrape by with a draw here.
I think Adrian might be coming to that conclusion right now, too, that he's just come up just a touch short. He played as quickly as he could to try to get the job done. But is there a way for him to deal the necessary points of damage?
Took some light risks with that Aetherling there.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if he has a card like Archangel of Thune. I don't think he does.
He does not.
Yeah, he's never been a huge fan of that card. You know, he could play Archangel pre-combat and then gain some life, something like that, but he doesn't have access to that, so he's going to cast Jace's Ingenuity, pick up 2 lands and an Elixir. Going to cash an Elspeth for the emblem. Fire up these Mutavaults, and I think what he's going to do is hope that Derek doesn't activate that Elixir.
Yeah.
I think that's the plan. Attack you for a bunch. Derek says, I'm going to activate my Elixir of Immortality. I will not forget. Up to 19. Take 17, go down to 2. And of course, he will shuffle everything back in. Sullivan will play Elixir of his own. And just pass the turn back. That's his last turn of the game.
Yeah, I think Adrian with a pretty commanding advantage here, but he's going to be about a turn short.
Yeah, it's a marathon affair, but he came up 1 turn short. Derek Wyatt, Adrian Sullivan will draw. Blue-white control, that's for control, cannot finish it off. Sullivan with a pretty decent advantage at that point, but time is a thing.
Yeah, he did what he could.
Yeah.
It's a long game. Derek was able to find a lot of help there on the last couple turns where it looked like Adrian had an enormous edge, and frankly he did. I think Adrian, with 1 or 2 more turns, probably locks that up.
Yep.
But Adrian did what he could in terms of time, and Derek was also playing pretty fast.
He was playing very quickly.
But these games just go on for a really long time when both players are revving, and this is going to be the result a good percentage of the time.
Yeah, that's